Picture this. You're living your best life, enjoying your home, when suddenly the government knocks on your door. They say they need your property for a new highway. And guess what? They can take it, even if you don't want to sell. That, my friends, is the magic, or rather, the potential nightmare, of eminent domain. Eminent domain is the government's power to take private property for public use. It's like a legal trump card that lets them seize your land, your house, or even your business if they deem it necessary for the greater good. Now, before you start panicking, there are rules and regulations surrounding eminent domain, but it's still a pretty big deal. The concept of eminent domain might sound unfair, and frankly, sometimes it is. But it's also a necessary tool for governments to function and provide essential services. Imagine trying to build a road, a school, or a hospital if the government had to negotiate with every single landowner along the way. It would be chaos. So, eminent domain is a double-edged sword. It allows for progress and development, but it also has the potential to displace people and businesses. The key is finding the right balance between public need and private property rights. And that, my friends, is where things get complicated. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, doesn't the Constitution protect my property rights? And you're right, it does. The Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution explicitly states that nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. This little clause is the bedrock of eminent domain law in the United States. It acknowledges the government's power to take private property, but also sets limits on that power. The government can't just waltz in and seize your property on a whim. They have to prove that it's for public use, and they have to provide you with just compensation. But here's the catch. The terms public use and just compensation are open to interpretation. And over the years, the courts have grappled with defining these terms and setting the boundaries of eminent domain. This ambiguity has led to some pretty controversial cases, with property owners challenging the government's definition of public use and the fairness of the compensation offered. So, while the Fifth Amendment provides some protection for property owners, it's not always as straightforward as it seems. Let's break down some of the legal jargon surrounding eminent domain, shall we? First up, public use. This seems pretty self-explanatory, right? The government can take your property if it's for something that will benefit the public, like a road, a school, or a park. But hold on a minute. What about situations where the government takes your property and then gives it to a private developer? Is that still considered public use? That's a question that has sparked heated debate and legal challenges. Then we have just compensation. This means the government must pay you a fair price for your property. But what exactly is fair? Is it simply the market value of the property? Or does it also include things like the emotional distress of being forced to move, the loss of business income, or the historical significance of your property? As you can see, defining these terms isn't always easy. It often involves complex legal arguments and subjective judgments. And it's no surprise that these issues have ended up in court time and time again. Eminent domain isn't a new concept. In fact, it's been around for centuries. The ancient Romans had a similar practice, as did many other civilizations throughout history. The idea is simple. When the needs of the many outweigh the rights of the few, the government has the power to act in the best interest of society. In the United States, eminent domain has been used since the early days of the Republic. It was instrumental in building infrastructure projects like roads, canals, and railroads, which were essential for the country's growth and development. However, the use of eminent domain has also been a source of controversy and debate throughout American history. From the seizure of Native American lands to the displacement of communities for urban renewal projects, the power of eminent domain has often been used in ways that have disproportionately impacted marginalized groups. Section 5. Roads, bridges, and pipelines. Eminent domain in action. Now, let's look at some concrete examples of how eminent domain is used in the real world. One of the most common applications is for infrastructure projects like roads, bridges, and highways. When constructing these vital transportation links, the government often needs to acquire land from private owners. Eminent domain also comes into play for projects like pipelines, power lines, and other utilities. These infrastructure elements are essential for delivering energy and resources to communities, and eminent domain can be used to secure the necessary land rights. Beyond these traditional infrastructure projects, eminent domain has also been used for a wider range of purposes in recent years. For example, it has been used to assemble land for economic development projects, such as shopping malls, stadiums, and private universities. This expansion of eminent domain beyond traditional public works projects has sparked debate about the appropriate scope of the government's power to take private property. Critics argue that using eminent domain for private development projects goes too far and benefits private interests at the expense of individual property rights. Section 6. They took what? Real-life tales of eminent domain. Eminent domain has real-life consequences for people and communities. Let's delve into some notable examples. One famous case is a 2005 Supreme Court decision. New London, Connecticut, used eminent domain for a redevelopment project. The decision sparked outrage and protests. Another example is the Dakota Access Pipeline controversy. The pipeline's route crossed sacred Native American lands. The use of eminent domain sparked protests and legal challenges. Section 7. Your home versus a highway balancing public good and private rights. The heart of the eminent domain debate lies in finding the right balance between the public good and private property rights. On the one hand, the government has a responsibility to provide for the common good, which sometimes requires taking private property for public use. On the other hand, individuals have a fundamental right to own property and shouldn't be forced to give it up without just cause and fair compensation. It's a delicate balancing act, and there's no easy answer. Supporters of eminent domain argue that it's a necessary tool for governments to function and provide essential services. They point to the countless roads, schools, hospitals, and other public projects that have been made possible through eminent domain. Opponents argue that eminent domain is often abused, with the government seizing property for questionable public use purposes and providing inadequate compensation to property owners. They believe that the government should prioritize negotiating with property owners before resorting to eminent domain. Section 8. The battle continues. Eminent domain in the courts and beyond. The debate over eminent domain is far from over. Court cases continue to shape the legal landscape, and legislative efforts at both the state and federal levels aim to reform eminent domain laws. Some states have passed laws restricting the use of eminent domain for private development projects following the decision. Others have sought to strengthen protections for property owners by requiring higher compensation or limiting the circumstances under which eminent domain can be used. The battle over eminent domain is a reminder that even in a country founded on individual liberty, the needs of the many sometimes outweigh the rights of the few. Finding that balance is an ongoing challenge and one that will continue to be debated in the courts, legislatures, and public square.